The Elephant Island Chronicles, Presence, The Pendulum City, by Conrad Hannon, narration by 11 Labs. Pendulum City, a metropolis unlike any other, lay in the heart of the fluctuating realm. Suspended between two colossal cliffs, the entire city swung back and forth on an enormous pendulum, its rhythm dictating the very pulse of urban life. On one cliff face loomed the imposing fortress of Vitality, its gleaming gears and pulsing crystals visible even from a distance. Opposite stood the ethereal citadel of Serenity, its misty spires seeming to shimmer in and out of existence. The city's peculiar construction meant a life of constant motion for its inhabitants. As it swung closer to one cliff, it inevitably drew further from the other in an endless cycle that shaped every aspect of society. The citizens of Pendulum City were known as the oscillators. Their bodies were marvels of engineering, intricate clockwork mechanisms powered by twin energy sources, crimson vigor crystals and azure tranquility gems. The harmonious glow of both energies signified a healthy oscillator, while an imbalance or dimming of either source was cause for concern. The Council of Equilibrium governed this extraordinary city, its edicts and policies as regular and predictable as the swing of the great pendulum itself. They stood as the self-proclaimed guardians of balance, their methods unquestioned by most. But in a world of perpetual motion, what does proper balance really mean? And at what cost is the rhythm maintained? Our story begins with Cog, a young oscillator whose life is about to take an unexpected turn, setting in motion events that will challenge the very foundations of Pendulum City. Chapter 1. The Fractured Rhythm. Cog had always prided herself on her perfectly synchronized gears. Unlike some oscillators who struggled to maintain their internal harmony, Cog's vigor crystal pulsed in perfect rhythm with her tranquility gem. She was the epitome of balance in Pendulum City. That is, until the day of the Great Oscillation. It was supposed to be a celebration, a day when the pendulum's swing would reach its maximum arc, bringing the city tantalizingly close to the Fortress of Vitality and the Citadel of Serenity. Oscillators lined the streets, their clockwork bodies humming with anticipation. Cog stood at the edge of Gear Plaza, her copper-plated fingers intertwined with those of her partner, Sprocket. As the city swung towards the Fortress of Vitality, a great cheer arose from the crowd. Oscillators reached out, hoping to touch the cliff face and feel a surge of physical power course through their mechanisms. But something went wrong. The pendulum swung too far, too fast. There was a sickening crunch as the city collided with the cliff face. Oscillators were thrown to the ground, their gears grinding in protest. In the chaos, Cog felt a sharp pain in her chest. She looked down to see a thin crack running across her vigor crystal. "No," she whispered, her voice lost in the cacophony of distress around her. As the city swung back away from the Fortress of Vitality, Cog felt a weakness she had never experienced before. Her gears slowed, and her vigor crystal's usual vibrant crimson glow dimmed to a dull red. Sprocket helped her to her feet, concern etched across his brass face. "We need to get you to a mechanic," he said, his own gears whirring with worry. But as they made their way through the panicked crowd, Cog noticed something strange. It wasn't just her vigor crystal that was affected. Her tranquility gem, once a serene blue, now flickered erratically. The crack in her physical energy was somehow disrupting her mental harmony as well. In the distance, sirens blared from the Council of Equilibrium's headquarters. A tinny voice crackled over the city's speakers. "Remain calm, oscillators. The situation is under control. Please proceed to your designated tune-up stations for assessment and repairs." Cog and Sprocket exchanged glances. They both knew the tune-up stations were ill-equipped to handle serious damage. But what choice did they have? As they joined the throng of injured oscillators shuffling towards the nearest station, Cog couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger problem. Her once perfect rhythm was now fractured, and with it, the delicate balance of her existence in Pendulum City. Little did she know, her journey to restore her harmony would uncover truths about her world that would challenge everything she thought she knew about the nature of well-being in the fluctuating realm. Chapter 2. The Tune-Up Travesty. The tune-up station loomed before Cog and Sprocket, a hodgepodge of gears, pipes, and blinking lights that seemed more like a parody of efficiency than an actual medical facility. Oscillators of all shapes and sizes queued up, their damaged parts clanking and whirring out of sync. A cheerful sign above the entrance read, "Quick fixes for all oscillations." Below it, in smaller print, Council-approved methods only. As they waited, Cog observed the medical professionals at work. They were peculiar, with oversized magnifying glasses strapped to their heads and comically large wrenches in hand. They called themselves adjusters, but their methods seemed more suited to fixing furniture than healing living beings. Finally, it was Cog's turn. The adjuster, a spindly oscillator named Crank, peered at her damaged vigor crystal through his magnifying glass. Oh my, Crank muttered, his own gears clicking rapidly. This simply won't do. Your vigor levels are critically low, but fear not, we have just the thing. Before Cog could protest, Crank produced a large rubber mallet from his toolkit. With a manic grin, he swung it towards Cog's chest. Wait! Sprocket intervened, grabbing Crank's arm. How is hitting her supposed to help? Crank looked offended. It's the Council-approved method for realigning misaligned energies. The percussive maintenance technique never fails. Cog stepped back, clutching her chest protectively. I don't think that's going to fix a cracked crystal, she said. Crank scratched his metallic head, causing a screech that set everyone's gears on edge. Well, if you insist on being difficult, we'll have to try our alternative treatment. He rummaged through a cluttered drawer and pulled out a small, wind-up toy in the shape of a smiling sun. Here, he said, handing it to Cog. Wind this up 3 times a day and think happy thoughts. Your tranquility gem will be glowing in no time. Cog stared at the toy in disbelief. But what about my vigor crystal? It's cracked. Crank waved dismissively. Oh, that old thing? Just ignore it. If you can't see the crack, it doesn't exist. He turned to the next patient in line. Next. As Cog and Sprocket left the tune-up station, they saw dozens of oscillators treated with similar techniques. One had his gears doused in glitter for positive energy. At the same time, another was being told to stand on one leg and recite tongue twisters to rebalance his inner mechanisms. This is absurd, Cog said, her voice a mixture of frustration and despair. How can the Council think this is helping anyone? Sprocket nodded grimly. It's almost as if they don't want to acknowledge the real problems. It's easier to pretend everything can be fixed with a quick tune-up. As they walked away, Cog felt the erratic pulsing of her vigor crystal and the uneasy flickering of her tranquility gem. The imbalance was worsening, and she knew the Council's quick fixes weren't the answer. We need to find real help, she said, determination creeping into her voice. There must be someone in Pendulum City who understands what's happening. Chapter 3. The Underground Cognoscenti. As night fell over Pendulum City, the great pendulum slowed its swing, entering its rest phase. Most oscillators retreated to their homes for recharging, but Cog and Sprocket had other plans. Whispers in the tune-up station had led them to the Rusty Gasket, a dingy oil bar in the city's lower levels. It was here, they'd heard, that one could find the underground cognoscenti, a secret society of oscillators who rejected the Council's simplistic view of well-being. The Rusty Gasket was dim and smoky, filled with the soft clinks and whirs of oscillators trying to keep a low profile. In a shadowy corner, they spotted their contact, a grizzled old oscillator named Gear Grinder. his once shiny casing now dull and scratched. "So," Gear Grinder rasped, eyeing Cog's dimmed vigor crystal. "Another victim of the Council's perfect balance, eh?" Cog nodded, explaining her situation. As she spoke, Gear Grinder's expression grew increasingly grim. "Listen closely," he said, leaning in. "What happened to you isn't rare. The Council knows their system is flawed, but they're too invested in maintaining the illusion of control." He pulled out a schematic, showing a complex web of gears and crystals. "Our bodies aren't simple machines. The connection between vigor and tranquility is intricate. Damage to one invariably affects the other." Sprocket interjected, "But why doesn't the Council acknowledge this?" Gear Grinder laughed bitterly. "Because it's easier to treat symptoms than address root causes. They'd rather hand out wind-up toys than admit the whole system needs an overhaul." As they talked, other oscillators gathered around, sharing their own stories. There was Rusty, whose constant exposure to the Fortress of Vitality's energies had corroded his casing, leaving him in chronic pain. And Sprocket, whose job enforcing the Council's rigid schedules had wound her gears so tight she could barely function. "The Council preaches balance," Gear Grinder continued, "but they force us into unnatural rhythms. They claim swinging between extremes is healthy, but it's tearing us apart." Cog's mind raced. "So what can we do?" Gear Grinder smiled mysteriously. "There's a place hidden between the fortress and the citadel, a workshop run by the master mechanic. She understands the true nature of our mechanisms." "Can she help me?" Cog asked, hope rising in her voice. "Perhaps, but reaching her is dangerous. The Council guards the cliffs zealously. They can't risk oscillators discovering the truth." Cog and Sprocket exchanged glances. The journey would be perilous, but the alternative, a life of quick fixes and dwindling energy, was unthinkable. "We'll do it," Cog declared. As they left the rusty gasket with directions to the hidden workshop, Cog felt a curious sensation. Despite her damaged crystals, a new kind of energy surged through her gears. It was the power of understanding, of seeing beyond the Council's simplistic worldview. But as they emerged onto the streets, they noticed something unsettling. Council enforcers were out in unusually high numbers, their scanning beams sweeping the crowds. "Looking for malfunctions," Sprocket whispered. "We need to be careful." Cog nodded, her determination only growing stronger. Chapter 4. The Perilous Pilgrimage. Dawn broke over Pendulum City, painting the sky in hues of copper and brass. Cog and Sprocket stood at the edge of the Lower Gears district, gazing up at the imposing cliffs that flanked the city. Somewhere between the Fortress of Vitality and the Citadel of Serenity lay their destination, the workshop of the mysterious master mechanic. "We'll have to time our ascent perfectly," Sprocket mused, studying the pendulum's arc. "When the city swings closest to the cliffs, we jump." Cog nodded, trying to ignore the erratic pulsing of her damaged vigor crystal. The thought of leaping into the unknown sent her tranquility gem flickering wildly. As they prepared for their perilous journey, a commotion erupted nearby. A group of Council enforcers had cornered an oscillator whose gears were grinding audibly. "Citizen, you are exhibiting signs of malfunction," the lead enforcer droned. "Please submit to immediate recalibration." The terrified oscillator backed away. "No, please. I just need rest. Not another one of your fixes." Without warning, the enforcers activated their harmony hooks, long coiled appendages designed to escort malfunctioning oscillators to tune-up stations. The hooks shot out, wrapping around the protesting citizen. Cog instinctively stepped forward to help, but Sprocket held her back. "We can't risk drawing attention," he whispered, pain evident in his voice. As the enforcers dragged the struggling oscillator away, Cog and Sprocket slipped into the shadows, their cores heavy with the weight of what they'd witnessed. They reached the launching point just as Pendulum City began its swing towards the Fortress of Vitality. The cliff face loomed closer, its surface riddled with protruding gears and piston-like structures. "Now!" Sprocket yelled. They leaped, their gears whirring in terrified excitement. For a heart-stopping moment, they were airborne, the abyss of the fluctuating realm yawning beneath them. Then, with a clang, they latched onto the cliff face. "Keep climbing!" Cog gasped, her damaged vigor crystal straining under the effort. "We need to reach the midpoint before the city swings back." They scrambled upwards, dodging moving parts and bursts of steam. The exertion sent waves of pain through Cog's systems, but she pressed on, driven by desperation and hope. Halfway up, disaster struck. A massive gear suddenly rotated, nearly crushing Sprocket. As he dodged, his grip slipped. "Sprocket!" Cog screamed, reaching out. Their fingers interlocked as Sprocket fell, leaving him dangling over the abyss. Cog's gears screamed in protest as she held on, her vigor crystal pulsing erratically. "Let go," Sprocket said softly. "You can't save us both with your damaged crystal." "No," Cog grunted. She heaved Sprocket up to safety with a surge of strength she didn't know she possessed. A curious thing happened as they clung to the cliff face, panting. Cog's vigor crystal, strained to its limit, began to glow brighter than it had since the accident. And with it, her tranquility gem stabilized, emitting a steady, calming light. "How?" Sprocket began, staring in awe. "I don't know," Cog replied, equally amazed. "But I think this is what real balance feels like." Their moment of revelation was short-lived. A klaxon blared from Pendulum City, and searchlights began scanning the cliff face. "Intruder alert," a mechanized voice boomed. "Unauthorized oscillators detected in the boundary zone." Chapter 5. The Workshop Between Worlds. Cog and Sprocket huddled in a narrow crevice as searchlights swept across the cliff face. The klaxons from Pendulum City echoed through the fluctuating realm, a cacophony of mechanical alarm. "We can't go back now," Cog whispered, her newly brightened vigor crystal pulsing with determination. "We've come too far." Sprocket nodded, his gears whirring in agreement. "The master mechanic's workshop should be just ahead. If we can reach it before the enforcers find us." They waited for a gap in the searchlight patterns, then scrambled upwards. The cliff face became increasingly strange as they climbed. Gears merged seamlessly with organic-looking structures. Pistons pumped a luminous fluid through vein-like tubes. "It's as if the Fortress of Vitality and the Citadel of Serenity are blending together," Sprocket observed, wonder in his voice. Finally, they reached a small plateau. Before them stood an inconspicuous door, almost invisible against the cliff face. Only by the soft, pulsing glow emanating from its edges could they discern its presence at all. Cog approached cautiously, raising her hand to knock. Before she could, the door swung open silently. "Come in quickly," a melodious voice called from within. "The enforcers are not far behind." They rushed inside, and the door sealed shut behind them. As their optical sensors adjusted to the dim light, they found themselves in a vast, circular chamber. It was unlike anything they had seen in Pendulum City. Workbenches lined the walls, covered in an assortment of familiar and alien tools. Bubbling vats of iridescent liquids sat next to delicate clockwork constructions. In the center of the room, a massive holographic display showed the intricate inner workings of an oscillator, far more complex than anything the Council had ever revealed. And there, tinkering with a pulsing crystal, stood a figure that could only be the master mechanic. Her body was a harmonious blend of gleaming gears and flowing organic forms. When she turned to face them, her eyes held the wisdom of eons. "Welcome, Cog and Sprocket," she said, her voice resonating with the hum of perfectly balanced energies. "I've been expecting you." Cog stepped forward, her damaged vigor crystal now pulsing in sync with the strange energies of the workshop. "You have? But how? And who are you really?" The master mechanic smiled, a gesture that somehow conveyed both warmth and sadness. "I am what the Council fears most, proof that their system of rigid balance is fundamentally flawed. They call me a malfunction, a glitch in the great machine of Pendulum City, but in truth, I am evolution." She gestured to the holographic display. "You see, the Council's ideology of perfect equilibrium, constantly swinging between extremes, is unnatural and harmful. True well-being isn't about perfect balance, but harmony, adaptability, and growth." Sprocket's gears clicked rapidly as he processed this information. But the vigor crystals, the tranquility gems, aren't they essential to our function? "They are part of you," the master mechanic explained, "but they were never meant to be separate, competing forces. Observe." She waved her hand, and the holographic display zoomed in on the connection between a vigor crystal and a tranquility gem. Tiny filaments could be seen stretching between them, carrying pulses of energy back and forth. "They are intrinsically linked," she continued. "When one suffers, the other is affected. But they can also support and strengthen each other. In its misguided pursuit of control, the Council has been suppressing this natural interplay." Cog looked down at her own damaged crystal, remembering the surge of energy she had felt when saving Sprocket. "Is that why, when I pushed myself to save Sprocket, my vigor and tranquility seemed to improve?" The master mechanic nodded approvingly. "Exactly. You experienced genuine growth, not the artificial oscillation the Council enforces. But now," her expression grew serious, "we must act quickly. Your escape has forced the Council's hand. They will be coming in force, not just for you, but to shut down this workshop and maintain their illusion of control." She turned to a complex console and began inputting commands. The workshop hummed to life, energies swirling around them. "I can help repair the damage to your systems," she said, "but more importantly, I can awaken the true potential within you. The question is, are you ready to embrace a new way of existence? To challenge the very foundations of Pendulum City?" Cog and Sprocket exchanged glances. In that moment, they realized that their quest for healing had become something far greater. They were standing on the precipice of a revolution that could transform all oscillators' lives. "We're ready," Cog said firmly, her voice resonating with newfound purpose. As the master mechanic began the procedure, alarms blared in the distance. The Council's forces were approaching. The fate of Pendulum City now hung in the balance, with Cog and Sprocket at the heart of a conflict that would redefine the very nature of well-being in the fluctuating realm. Chapter 6. The Resonance Revolution. The workshop thrummed with energy as the master mechanic worked on Cog and Sprocket. Streams of luminescent fluid flowed around them, seeping into their gears and crystals. Cog felt a strange sensation as if her very essence was being rewritten. "I'm not simply repairing you," the master mechanic explained, her hands dancing over complex controls. "I'm awakening your innate ability to self-regulate and grow. You'll no longer be bound by the rigid oscillations the Council enforces." Suddenly, the workshop shook violently. Dust rained from the ceiling as the sound of grinding gears filled the air. "They're here," the master mechanic said grimly. "The Council's ultimate enforcer, the harmonic hammer. It'll try to pound this entire section of cliff into scrap." Another tremor rocked the workshop. Cracks began to appear in the walls. "We're not done," Sprocket said, panic edging his voice. "You'll have to be," the master mechanic replied. She pulled a lever, and the energies surrounding Cog and Sprocket intensified. "Your transformation is incomplete, but it will have to do. Remember, True balance isn't about swinging between extremes but finding your own rhythm. With a final surge, the energy dissipated. Cog and Sprocket stood, marveling at their new forms. Their once rigid bodies now flowed with an organic grace, gears and crystals seamlessly integrated. The master mechanic pressed a glowing orb into Cog's hands. This contains the truth about our nature and the knowledge to awaken others. You must take it to the heart of Pendulum City. But what about you? Cog asked. A sad smile crossed the master mechanic's face. My time in this form is ending, but through you, my work will continue. Before they could protest, she pushed them towards a hidden exit. Go! Show Pendulum City the true meaning of harmony. Cog and Sprocket emerged onto a narrow ledge just as the workshop collapsed. The harmonic hammer, a colossal machine of pistons and gears, loomed above, its enormous head poised to strike again. How can we possibly fight that? Sprocket asked. Cog looked at her transformed body, feeling the new energy flowing through her. We don't fight, we resonate. Understanding dawned in Sprocket's eyes. Together they began to move, not with the rigid tick-tock of Pendulum City's enforced rhythm, but with a fluid, natural motion. Their gears hummed in harmony, creating a frequency that spread through the cliff face. The harmonic hammer struck again, but this time, instead of crumbling, the cliff absorbed the blow. The hammer recoiled as if it had struck a tuning fork. Cog and Sprocket continued their resonant dance, their energy spreading. Below, in Pendulum City, oscillators began to stop and listen. Some felt their gears shift, aligning with this new rhythm. The council's voice boomed across the realm. Return to your designated oscillations. This harmony is a malfunction. But it was too late. The resonance was spreading, awakening something long dormant in the oscillators. All across Pendulum City, citizens began to move to their own rhythms. The rigid swing of the great pendulum faltered. Cog raised the glowing orb high, her voice ringing out, "Citizens of Pendulum City, we've been told that balance means swinging between extremes. But true harmony comes from within, from the natural interplay of all parts of our being." The orb pulsed, sending waves of enlightenment through the city. Oscillators everywhere felt their vigor crystals and tranquility gems synchronize in ways they never had before. In the council chambers, alarms blared as the mechanisms of control began to break down. The council members watched in horror as the great pendulum slowed to a stop. But instead of falling into chaos, Pendulum City was filled with a new kind of energy. Oscillators helped those struggling to find their rhythm. The once rigid streets flowed with newfound flexibility. Cog and Sprocket made their way down to Gear Plaza, now the center of a joyous celebration. Oscillators marveled at their awakened forms, eager to learn. "What happens now?" a young oscillator asked, her gears clicking with excitement. Cog smiled, feeling the harmonious flow of her vigor and tranquility. "Now we grow, we learn, we find our own balance, not one imposed from above. Pendulum City will become a place of true well-being, where physical and mental health support each other naturally." As the sun set on the fluctuating realm, Pendulum City pulsed with a new organic rhythm. The era of enforced oscillation was over. In its place, a symphony of individual harmonies began, each oscillator contributing their unique note to the grand melody of genuine well-being. Cog looked out at the transformed city, the master mechanic's last words echoing in her mind. She knew that maintaining this new harmony wouldn't always be easy. There would be challenges and moments of discord. But now, the citizens of Pendulum City had the tools to adapt, to support each other, and to find their own balance in the great dance of physical and mental health. As night fell, the glow of countless synchronized vigor crystals and tranquility gems lit up the city, a testament to the power of true harmony and a beacon of hope for a future where well-being was no longer a rigid oscillation, but a beautiful, ever-evolving symphony. The end. From all of us here at the Elephant Island Chronicles, we hope you have enjoyed this original short story by Conrad Hannon. Until next time, stay gruntled.